Hello, I'm TAP-G.
And I'm SurferClock.
And welcome to What's the Attraction? Where our work is your vacation. It's time for another theme park reel view, and today we're covering 2013's controversial documentary, Blackfish.
Blackfish delves into the 2010 death of SeaWorld trainer Dawn Brancheau, whose life was prematurely ended following a Dine with Shamu show, when the orca she was interacting with, a bull male named Tillicum, dragged her into the water. She couldn't be revived after her ordeal, and the SeaWorld community suffered an immense loss.
Questions were raised about SeaWorld's practices, and ultimately it was decided until further notice that the trainers would be kept out of the water. Folks still flock to the park despite this, and SeaWorld continues to enjoy its success.
In 2013, a director named Gabriella Copperthwaite released a documentary, a compilation of thousands of hours of interviews, footage, and research compressed into a slick, impassioned 83-minute package called Blackfish. Consider it an accelerated history course on killer whale captivity.
That's the nice way of putting it. After its release on CNN and Netflix, the public went crazy. SeaWorld's Facebook is subjected to around 100 comments a day badgering them about captive orcas. Nearly all of 2014's bans for the Band's Broom barbecue event have pulled out, and the park still occasionally contends with picketers, citing the film as their inspiration.
The controversy has built to undeniable levels, enough so to warrant a discussion from us. So, what do we think? Well, frankly, it's not that simple. Blackfish is designed to elicit a response, a specific response in most, and while it is well crafted to do just that, it's important to not be overcome emotionally or mentally by its message.
From our standpoint, theme park fans and critics, we'd hate to see an important institution like SeaWorld fall completely into non-existence. For both SurferClock and I, SeaWorld represents public interest in marine life and place it as inspiration. After viewing Ms. Copperthwaite's documentary, we conducted our own research as much of the film's message is so polarizing and, frankly, anti-SeaWorld.
Before we launch into our own thoughts, we'd like to share with you the 20 things we found wrong with Blackfish, the sources of which we will make available at the bottom of this video's description. So, let's start with number 20, the other trainers who are critical of Dawn's attack and the film's play-by-play version. Now, when the other two trainers were talking about...
I believe that was David Duffy and Jeff Ventries.
Thank you. David
Ventries. David Duffy?
David Duffus?
Yes, D-U-F-F-U-S.
Okay, when the other two trainers were talking about the incident that happened and the play-by-play that the film gives, this gives these two a chance to be highly critical of how she handled it.
Near the end of the film, there's showing of the events that led up to Tillicum's snapping and eventually the attack of Dawn Brancheau. And what you hear is the two trainers talking about, okay, she did this wrong, this is what Tillicum's doing, and eventually this leads to what happens. This is a shameful disgrace. Why? Because both Jeff Ventries and David Duffy have absolutely no qualifications critiquing someone who has had so much experience with killer whale training and Dawn.
Honestly, it's almost like the creators of like Adventure Time or Regular Show, criticizing Pixar on how they make animated films. It's such a disparity of the level of experience that it's simply not fair the way which they describe the incident.
And we've heard a couple of different rebuttals from SeaWorld trainers. That we'll get to them in just a little bit. But listening to these two talking about what they think they know is going on, when the fact of the matter is they just don't. And that's not fair. That's not right.
Yeah, and what's worst of all is they weren't there.
No, they weren't. Number 19. Almost no orca attacks at SeaWorld for over 50 years. SeaWorld San Diego has been in existence since 1964, and SeaWorld Orlando has been around since 1973. How many killer whale attacks have happened? According to Blackfish, there's been, 5 as a whole?
Yes.
In 50 years. That is a very, very low number.
That's a pretty solid track record.
If we're dealing with animals and we had 15 attacks over the past 50 years, then I think we'd be more concerned and there would be much less use of them in captivity to the point where there'd probably be none at all. But to say that there have been 5 attacks, we don't know the actual number. We'll be honest about that. And say that these animals aren't fit for a captive life, that is brutally unfair to SeaWorld as a whole, or even marine parks in general.
Well, if we're going more general with marine parks, there have been a number, I'd say something like 15 to 20 incidents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in this case, though, to say that there have been only about 5 attacks in the past 50 years in SeaWorld, that's really not fair and that's not justified.
Sure thing. Number 18. Now, Blackfish does raise an interesting, point of view and an interesting question. Now, most of the folks who come out of Blackfish will say things like they shouldn't be keeping these orcas here, or they should put them in sea pens, or they should just set them free. The problem is that SeaWorld creates such a convenient environment for people who really care about these animals to go see them. And it provides a much more solid interaction. It provides a more solid foundation.
Imagine when you were a little kid and you wanted to learn more about cetaceans like orcas or dolphins. You would either, watch them on TV, see a YouTube video, National Geographic, or something like that. It's a completely different experience to go to a place like SeaWorld, doing the shows, or just seeing them up close and personal. The question we want to know is, if SeaWorld to be shut down, where will all these budding marine biologists go?
It's not like everyone has access to the oceans, or they have a dad with a boat in California or something like that. So it's hard to imagine that if places like SeaWorld don't exist, where will people get the inspiration to want to save these creatures?
I think you said you wanted to be a marine biologist at one point, didn't you, SurferClock?
I actually did. That was one of the many career aspirations that I've had. And being able to go to SeaWorld with my mom was always it really helped to solidify that foundation. Now, despite the fact that this actually didn't go the place where I wanted it to go at that time,
yeah,
the fact still stands that if it weren't for SeaWorld, I might not have had that inspiration in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really unfair to, take that away from other people who might have the power to do greater good.
Exactly. Let's see. Number 17. This movie is blatantly emotionally manipulative. All documentaries, to a point, have to be emotional to get you invested, to get you energized in what's going on, and get you ready to make a stand for the cause that it's putting out. And this one does it so poorly, I'm surprised they didn't get it from a dime store.
Well, it is emotionally manipulative.
Like, there's at one point where they're talking about the killer whales being separated from their moms and the calves being separated from their moms. We'll get to that in a bit. But they're showing a picture of a calf that is only days old. And they're saying that this is the whales and this is what happens. And that is not right. It's like, you can say as much as you want about, let's for example, say crime in New York City, and you show a dead kitten on the sidewalk. That has nothing to do with what you're talking about, but the very image is supposed to make you feel so distraught and wanting to make a cause, go for the cause and stand up for it. And unfortunately, that's the problem. That's a big problem here.
Well, a lot of it is the big difference between reason and emotion.
Yeah.
This film does a whole lot of manipulation of your emotions to really impassion you toward it, making it stand. But the problem is that the images shown in the film sometimes aren't congruent with what is actually being said.
All in all, what we're trying to say is that if you have to resort to simple imagery to get people motivated, maybe you're not making a good message in the first place.
Or you're not truly making what can be classified as a documentary.
Yeah.
Number 16. SeaWorld trainers and orcas are never forced to do anything together. Now, SeaWorld trainers, they have interactions and they have certain ways with which they go about things. The moment that someone becomes uncomfortable or they don't have a good feeling about a session, they can just say the word and another trainer will be put in to replace them.
there's no negative reinforcement there. No one's chastised, no one's criticized. And we've seen shows where things have gone wrong and there's easy ways of fixing them. I remember one time I went to see a Clyde and Seymour show at SeaWorld, and while the sea lions were bickering, at one point one lunged at the other's neck, and the animals were quickly brought backstage. As soon as they slipped backstage, I saw that the sea lions were promptly fed. Now, make any argument you want that they're not orcas or whatever. However, this seems to be this idea that if an animal doesn't do what the evil trainer wants them to do, then they're not fed and they are punished for it. One of the things that we read in an article by Julie Toma, we'll cite later, she says that the animals, no, they're not forced to do anything. However, since there's not a whole lot to do anyways at SeaWorld, this is a form of mental exercise that keeps them going. So, the trainers and the animals aren't forced to do anything as much as the documentary wants you to believe. Number 15, no attack footage. There's a moment in the film where Jeff Ventries is talking about an incident where one killer whale attacked a trainer, and he was told right away to destroy the footage. We did a little bit of research about Mr. Ventries, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
It was not exactly a most enlightening experience. For one thing, we found out that he worked in SeaWorld from 1987 until 1995. That means this man has worked at SeaWorld for less than 7 years. Second, he was cited as a man who committed many safety violations.
When did you say he worked till?
1987 to 1995.
That's 8 years.
Well, anyway, he's worked from SeaWorld from 1987 to 1995. So he's worked there for about 8 years. But he was fired because he committed multiple safety violations. The least of which was, what was the reason he got fired for?
Let's see. It was that he gave an orca a birthday kiss,
quote quote,
which involved him putting his head into an orca's mouth.
Putting your head into an orca's mouth is why he got fired from SeaWorld. If this man sounds like a credible resource to you, more power to you. But most importantly, the point where he's talking about when he was asked to destroy the footage, the obvious point where you're supposed to be mad at the man for keeping this hush-hush and quiet. Mark Simmons, one of our other sources, he was told that this was a man who was so anti-management that had he been asked to destroy the footage, Jeff Ventries would have done the exact opposite. In fact, Mark Simmons even says that he put him out there to record what had happened. So the footage still there. He said that the footage, the security footage does exist, but there's no actual footage of it.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, that's not a credible resource. Sorry, Blackfish, you lost me there.
Number 14. SeaWorld does not separate mother and calf unless necessary. Now, this was a source we cited from SeaWorld, which may not seem all that fair, but then again, Blackfish was even less fair.
Yeah.
So, either one was not being fair to the other, and it's just, they kind of cancel each other out. Now,
but anyway.
Now, SeaWorld has gone on record to say they do not separate mother from calf unless either is in danger or the integrity of the social structure is put at risk. Now, in the particular scene, they cite the separation of Takara from her mother and Kalina. Now, the image on screen makes it look like that these were young animals.
How old were they?
Well, Takara was 12 when she was separated from her mother, and Kalina was 4.5 years old. Now, Kalina was actually being disruptive to the other whales, and
I don't know about Takara.
I think they were both being disruptive.
Essentially, SeaWorld has come out and said that they do not separate mothers from their calves, unless they are being disruptive to the integrity of the healthy social structure of killer whales. If a baby or a mother is being disruptive or abusive, then yes, they will separate them if it means that the whales are going to be happy and healthy, in their social environment. So, unfortunately, this just isn't fact-based. Again, this is from SeaWorld, so
take that for what you will.
Please. Number 13. David Duffy is not a SeaWorld trainer expert. And who says this? OSHA. Yeah, SeaWorld and OSHA say that this man was not an expert on captive killer whales. But guess who's cited as an orca expert in the movie Blackfish?
Yep, David Duffy.
And it's really kind of the equivalent of seeing those drug commercials, and there's a guy in a lab coat talking to you about the health risks and everything, and the subtitle comes on that says an actor, not a professional. Yeah. This is really deceiving, and this makes me kind of upset, really. It really does. I think OSHA says that he's really an expert in geography.
Something like that. In any case, it's not
reliable.
It's not being an expert in what the film said he was an expert in. So that's an outright blatant lie. Number 12. Miss Copperthwaite did not inform SeaWorld of her intent. Now, Copperthwaite herself has come out and said that she tried to get interviews for SeaWorld.
Props to her for that. We'll give her that.
But SeaWorld denied her and Copperthwaite herself has come out in an interview stating that she provided her questions that she was going to ask, but she didn't reveal the intent and what she was going to do with the information that she was given.
She said that she didn't reveal too much information about what she wanted to ask because she didn't want to risk her sources. Yeah, we can see that, but unfortunately, if you don't tell the people you want to interview what your intent is, you're pretty much doomed from the start.
And you're breaking one of the golden rules of journalism.
In fact, Bridget Pearl and Mark Simmons have all said that we were under the influence that we were going to do something for Don Brancho. What ended up happening was an anti-captivity to orcas movie, and that is really misleading. So it makes it sound like this wasn't finalized in the details until the editing process.
Yeah.
And again, we're taking this straight from Miss Copperthwaite. This is on Fishbowl, New York. We're going to put up these links at the very bottom so you can check them out for yourself. Number 11. No one really knows how long orcas live in the wild. Okay. Stay away from the comment boxes. Allow me to explain. I have looked up on several websites to see how long orcas live in the wild. I've heard everything from 50, 60, 70, I even heard a source say 80 years in the wild. Now, one of the point of contentions in the movie Blackfish, they explicitly say that the orcas in SeaWorld live as long as the ones in the wild do. And yes, the killer whales in captivity tend not to live much longer than their mid-30s, but here's the problem. Orcas live all over the world, everywhere from Alaska to the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic and everywhere in between. So to say that these whales definitively do not live till this time, unfortunately, takes a lot of gusto out of your argument.
It just it's because the orca is such a wide-ranging animal, nobody can really get a definitive amount. It really depends on the range, it depends on their diet, and any number of circumstances. In other words, there's no true definitive answer for it. And yet, Blackfish makes it sound like SeaWorld doesn't know what they're saying about it. It's a dirty attack.
And yeah, is it fair to say that the whales at SeaWorld live exactly how long as they do in the wild? No, not really, but, you can't fault them for at least trying. Let's see.
Number 10. A former trainer by the name of Julie Toma came out with an amazing note on Facebook. And while we would love to actually state all of her points, there's just so much goodness there. There's so much good stuff that we can't possibly put it all in one packed episode like this is going to be.
She articulates several different questions asked of her from these activists and fans and puts them in a way that makes it very easy to understand. From the dorsal fin collapsing, the sea pens, the making SeaWorld all educational, to making the animals slaves, and of course the classic, these animals only live in bathtubs arguments.
Yes. We're going to go ahead and put a link up to that note or where that note can be read. That will be found on the bottom of this video.
And on our Facebook page, so please check that out. Number 9. No orcas have been captured in 35 years.
And actually, it's funny because the film cites that itself. but it makes it sound like that SeaWorld does still capture orcas.
So that's supposed to be another emotionally manipulative point for you, that it puts it out there and says that SeaWorld did this and this is evil. Yeah, they don't do it anymore, but they did this. So unfortunately, that makes it even less reliable. And SeaWorld has come out again and said they haven't done this in 35 years. So why are these points being made so it can sensationalize these facts? SeaWorld has grown, evolved, and become a much better marine park than it used to be.
Certainly. Number 8. In the same Carpetbagger New York blog,
this was from the New York Times in a section called Carpetbagger, actually, instead of Fishbowl. Copperthwaite actually came out and said that she...
That's my point. Was this interview cited before? Oh, wait.
Again, Fishbowl, Carpetbagger.
Okay. On a New York Times... in a New York Times blog interview with Gabriella Copperthwaite... In a New York Times interview that was done on the Carpetbagger blog on the New York Times site, Gabriella Copperthwaite herself has stated that in order to make a good documentary, from her point of view, is that you can't just information bomb people. You can't just fact. So, in order to make the best story, she had to leave some facts out. Now, this is a major point of contention, because you just can't leave facts out that might be important to your argument or your counter argument.
Now, we can't say if the information she left out was important to the documentary or not important. What we can say, though, is that Mark Simmons and Bridget Pearl, and assumedly even more people, had left a lot of information. Mark Simmons said he was in an interview for 3 hours, and his input was reduced to just a few lines. When you're making a documentary, you're supposed to represent all the information that you can. And to say you're sacrificing it for story, that is bull, because you're making a movie. She said she was more skilled in TV shows, so that I understand. You have to be more engaging to keep people interested. But if you're going to tell a story, tell a story. If you're going to tell us information, tell us information. Doing both is extremely tricky, and if you don't pull it off right, it's going to come off just like Blackfish.
One-sided and manipulative.
Very. Number 7. The movie was funded by PETA and Tim Zimmerman. Now, I'm not for cruelty to animals in any way, shape, or form. I have a soul. But the problem with PETA is that over the years, they've just become so crazy with trying to accuse people of things that just really have no point overall, that they've kind of lost their relevancy. I mean, we're talking about the people that complained a few years ago because Mario was wearing a tanuki suit, and apparently that promoted skinning and wearing of animals for fur. This is, I can't even begin to go on that one, but essentially, oh, okay, and yes, and Tim Zimmerman too. This gentleman, according to Mark Simmons, is a man who is so anti-SeaWorld, anti-zoo, and anti-captivity. And see, he was the producer of this movie, I believe?
I believe so.
When you're making a documentary, you can't have this kind of bias. You need to have an open mind so that this can be properly researched and get all the information out. When you have people going out of their way for anti-captivity messages, that's what the movie's going to be about, whether you want it to or not.
Well, that's because that's where the money's coming from. If the money comes from PETA and from somebody who is anti-captivity, that's obviously the message that's going to end up being skewed towards.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to make a documentary that's supposed to be fair and show both sides, you can't do that. So, sadly, this may have started with the proper intentions, but very early on, it got skewed in a wrong direction with someone with an agenda. So, sorry. Number 6. Tillicums prior to attacks are unconfirmed. Now, this refers to non-SeaWorld attacks. Actually, one was a non-SeaWorld attack, and one did happen... Well,
at Sealand of the Pacific.
No. I'm sorry. Let me just... Tillicum's prior to attacks are unconfirmed. Now, the film paints two incidents that were paint these two incidents as if they were Tillicum's fault entirely. The first incident happened at Sealand of the Pacific. There was a person who unfortunately lost their life, and after an interview with 19 different witnesses,
Yeah.
no one person could cite the whale that was supposed to be the orca that was supposed to be the instigator of the attack.
Out of the three.
Out of the three that were there. So they don't know for sure whether it was Tillicum. However, there were two other people that the film actually talked to that said it had to be Tillicum. It had to be Tillicum. He's going crazy. It had to be Tillicum.
And this happened, 20 years prior to the movie?
That's correct.
So something doesn't make sense here. 19 people couldn't figure out which of the orcas started it, but 20 years later, 2 people knew exactly which whale started it. And
Which
that's
is really suspicious.
Yeah.
Now, the second incident did take place at a SeaWorld park. As a matter of fact, it was SeaWorld Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
There was a gentleman who broke into the Shamu Stadium and decided he was going to have himself a swim with Tillicum without his clothes on. Now, the gentleman was found dead the next day, and there was a very comprehensive investigation into it. What was found was that this gentleman's death was caused by drowning.
And there was an idea that even though of course no one saw what happened, but according to sources, Kelty Burns was found on Tillicum's back, and he was I don't want to say mostly unscathed. He was kind of banged up, but for the most part, he wasn't mauled, he wasn't eaten, he wasn't anything. So in all likelihood, he stumbled in, he drowned, and Tillicum found a playmate. So even the sheriff's report said that there was most likely no aggressiveness involved.
Yeah, there was. The important thing to note here is that the report cited no aggressive behavior.
Now, we're not saying that Tillicum might not have aggressive behavior because we have never worked with Tillicum. We acknowledge that. However, you can't use these two sources as Tillicum is aggressive because, one, we just don't know, and two, there was no evidence that he was aggressive. The only death we know that is on his fins is the one of Don Brancheau's. And even then we don't know why, which is of course why we're here.
Yes.
Number 5. Don's arm was never swallowed.
Now this was actually, when I was watching the documentary, this was the first part that I had to stop, turn to my laptop, and do some research. What I ended up finding out was these calls. Now, the film starts out with a series of 911 calls, 2 of them actually being from SeaWorld.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the third one had a different voice and proclaimed that the whale had swallowed the trainer's arm. Now, doing a little bit of research, I found out that this was from a park patron perspective. Yet, this was put in with with the other 2 911 calls, which makes it sound like they were all SeaWorld.
Well, that's not even the problem with me. The problem is that that the documentary never explains that that's not what happened to Dawn, that her arm was not swallowed. That's the first thing they put out there, is that Dawn's arm was swallowed by Tillicum. We know that didn't happen. However, the documentary never has a chance to explain that, so there's only one purpose for this to be left in. It's meant to sensationalize, it's meant to scare you and shock you and anger you and...
Being so early in the film, it serves as a hook.
Yeah. So this is a really cheap ploy, and again, it's a means to be very emotionally manipulative, and sadly, this is what we have to contend with. So, Dawn's arm was never swallowed. Thanks for not clearing that up, Blackfish.
Number 4. Now, Bridget Pearl, again, is one of those trainers that was interviewed about the film. She was interviewed for the film, and she was under the impression that it was going to be a tribute to Dawn.
Someone she idolized.
Yes. When it became clear after maybe even just the first viewing of it, she wanted to come out publicly and criticize Blackfish for not being that tribute to Dawn that she was under the impression that it would be. Gabriella Copperthwaite's response: wait until after award season.
One of the things I've often heard people be critical about Blackfish, and trust me, there aren't many, is that a lot of people are assuming that Miss Copperthwaite was doing this so she can get recognized and awarded for an Oscar. And there's already been a lot of talk that Blackfish was snubbed by the Oscars, and it's not right. But if she had to go out of her way to tell Bridget Pearl to wait until after awards season to criticize the film, that raises a lot of serious questions. Mostly, are you that insecure about the film's message that you have to coax people to keep their yap shut until after the film is awarded and you can get praise? Maybe I'm being cynical. I don't know. But let me ask you folks, doesn't that make you a little bit suspicious? Number 3, Bridget Pearl. Again, we've been citing her throughout this whole thing, and we stand by her words. In fact, unlike Blackfish, what we're going to do is we're going to present to you the interview that we found with Bridget Pearl, who has come out and said these words against Blackfish and wants you to know the truth. We're spreading the word, listen to what she has to say, and she raises far too many good points than we ever could.
Number 2, Mark Simmons. Now he had a chat with he did an extensive interview with a site called Mice Chat, which again we'll be citing below. Now, Mark Simmons worked with Tilikum and marine mammals in general for a combined total of 27 years. Now, it's safe to say this guy has quite a lot of experience, and that his words would make a great foundation for what Blackfish was supposed to be. However, he conducted a 3-hour interview with Ms. Copperthwaite. Got reduced to 3 lines in the film. 3 lines, people.
This was one of the men who was very critical about the play-by-play at the end of the movie about what happened to Dawn, and was so appalled that people who knew nothing of Tilikum were critiquing the way that Dawn was interacting with Tilikum. And in fact, what makes this so critical is that Mark Simmons has worked with Tilikum almost as much as Dawn. So why he was silenced in favor of all these other people who clearly didn't know anything about what was going on, that makes me really kind of mad. And
Yeah.
again, we'll cite this so you can do the research on his interview and see for yourself. But this raises the question, what is the number one problem with Blackfish? The number one reason why we're raising our eyebrows in heavy suspicion? It's Gabriella's website is suspended. Go to the Blackfish.com website. Scroll about halfway down and find the link to Miss Copperthwaite's page. Click on that link. What does it say?
This site has been suspended.
It has been that way for weeks. A few weeks ago when we decided to do this, we decided to see what Miss Copperthwaite herself had to say about all this. And this was right after the Oscars were announced.
Yeah.
Our website was suspended. And we have been checking periodically every day for the past few weeks. And
it's still down.
It's still down. Go check it out for yourself. It's still down.
As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to also put that link in the bottom of the video description.
Now, again, this raises a lot of very serious questions. Did she run away because her film got snubbed and she didn't get honored anything? Where is she now? Why can't we contact her?
It would be really nice to be able to contact her with our questions.
And of course, we're as cynical as we are. I want to ask, like, are you running away because your film that wanted to launch your career is now getting attacked and not getting awarded? But I can't think of any other reason why she would have disappeared like this. Because that's my number one question. Where is she now? What's she up to?
It would be really nice to know.
I'm not implying that she's like sneaking away to come up with some evil scheme or something, but again, I'm very concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it would really be nice to be able to see her website, and I'd actually like to see what she has on her page.
And I'd like to see what she has to say now. So,
there it is, guys. 20 points. 20 points of contention that we found against this film.
So now the question is, what did we think of this film, flaws and all?
It's so difficult to watch. It's, again, as we've stated, it's emotionally manipulative. It shows some really, almost kind of disturbing imagery. But it's meant to. It's meant to make you feel uncomfortable whenever you watch this movie, so that when you do, you're ready to grab a sign, head to the nearest corner, and tell people to boycott SeaWorld. And that's really the main problem with this film, is that this could have been a documentary that examined both sides. It could have had SeaWorld's side, why they think killer whale captivity is so fantastic, and then it could have had the side where the animal activists and
that was one thing that we forgot to mention, is that she did try to get SeaWorld involved in this. So props to Miss Copperthwaite for that. I really mean that.
We didn't forget that.
Oh, we didn't?
No, it was on the list.
Anyway, she tried to get SeaWorld involved in this. They did not get involved. But there was some guy in the documentary who provided some kind of a straw man argument for SeaWorld, and obviously it was not shown in a very good light. So, unfortunately, if you're going to do a good documentary, you need to show both sides of an argument, and she made it so one-sided that it's impossible to come up with a good argument. And the really sad part is, it is a good documentary. It is well made.
Yeah, it's definitely skillfully edited and cobbled together, and a 98% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't lie.
And, of course, there's been all the backlash about the bans and the bans brewing barbecue. And we encourage everyone out there to sit down and watch Blackfish at least once. But when you do some research for yourself. Look at the links that we've provided and do links outside of it and come up with your own conclusion. There are bad things to keeping killer whales in captive, and there are good reasons for keeping them captive, just as there are good and bad sides to keeping them in the wild. But here, what's the attraction? We'll happily commend any documentary that shows both sides to the argument.
This one simply does not.
No. So, all in all, we're not fans of the documentary, but if there's anyone out there who wants to provide some fitting rebuttals and has any questions to offer, we'll be more than happy to answer them.
Sure thing.
So thank you so much for listening to our real view, folks. Do you have anything to add, SurferClock?
Sorry this episode is so long.
I will drink to that.
Okay, so for now,
Thank you so much for listening, folks, to our theme park real view of Blackfish. I'm TAP-G.
And I'm SurferClock.
And thanks for listening to What's the Attraction? Where our work is your vacation. See ya.